Welcome to Compass Points, the weekly podcast for CompassKnox.com. CompassKnox.com is your best source for news and politics in Knoxville and Knox County. Your hosts today are Scott Barker and Jesse Mayshark, the founders of CompassKnox.com. You can find their daily in-depth coverage and subscribe at CompassKnox.com. The Compass Point podcast is brought to you in conjunction with Almost an Agreement. Almost an Agreement is a layman's attempt to get a handle on the workings in government and politics that we deal with every day. Check them out at almostanagreement.com or subscribe for free on your favorite podcast provider. If you'd like to learn more about the topics discussed on today's podcast, go to CompassKnox.com and subscribe for in-depth coverage and much more. And now, here are your hosts, Scott and Jesse from CompassKnox.com.
It's the weekly podcast where we talk about Knoxville government, politics, news, education, business, Vols baseball, whatever gets our attention. I'm Jesse Mayshark, co-founder and co-publisher of Compass, which you can find at CompassKnox.com, which covers all of the above, including a little bit of Vols baseball, this week anyway. Joined, as always, by Scott Barker, co-publisher and co-founder of Compass. How are you doing today, Scott?
Doing just fine, gearing up for the Independence Day holiday.
Yes, we do have a holiday coming up where we celebrate the majesty of the great American project, which I know we're all feeling very positive and optimistic about today. But we're probably not going to talk about that too much. We do have things to talk about. We are also joined, I should mention, by our summer intern, Owen McCarthy. How are you doing today, Owen?
Good. Thanks so much for having me again.
Happy to have you, as always. Yes, we're not going to be talking about anything that may or may not have happened Thursday night in Atlanta, because we don't cover those things. Lots of other people out there to talk about that stuff. We're going to talk about stuff closer to home, which does include politics. We do have our own election, Knox County general election, coming up here August 1st. And so we're going to talk about a couple of the races there, a candidate forum that happened this week, and also some controversy about some election registration-related letters sent out by the state that have alarmed some people. But before we get to that, we are going to talk about some not so good news for the city of Knoxville in regard to their application for federal funding for that prospective bridge across the Tennessee River. And Scott, to start off, the University of Tennessee Board of Trustees met this past week, and they talked about and did a number of things, as they usually do at this June meeting. It's kind of their big annual meeting. But kind of the most important, the big headline out of this had to do with the man at the top of the entire operation there. What happened with Randy Boyd?
Well, Randy Boyd was coronated essentially for another 5-year term beginning next year, which is what his current term ends. Through as president of the university, he'll be president through 2030, the academic year 29-30, and it was got a glowing performance review that the chair John Compton read out or talked about all the accomplishments that UT has made under Boyd's leadership. Enrollment's up 13%. Number of degrees are up. The campus, the total enrollment, all campuses is up to 58,000 now, and so they gave him a new 5-year contract. He he's never taken any salary from UT, and is still not going to take the salary. He gets a stipend for health insurance, and that's about it. And
we should say that that's because he is independently quite wealthy.
Yes, he's got some cash, and anyway, he talked about he also talked about some of the things that he wants to focus on over the next 5 years. One of those is he wants to help the state address drug abuse and rural poverty, and he still wants to increase enrollment. The goal is to have enrollment up to 71,000 by 2030, and he wants to continue producing highly educated workers for the Tennessee workforce. That's been one of his big mantras the entire time. So he likes to he will have been here 6 years before by the time that his new term starts. So he will serve 11 years. He's fond of saying that this is the university's greatest decade, and I don't know exactly how he defines the greatest decade, but he certainly has the trustees believing that he's the right guy for the job.
Well, and it's interesting. This has been true really ever since Boyd was first appointed as an interim president back in 2018, and then of course when the board went ahead and hired him as the permanent full official president a couple of years after that. But the University of Tennessee Board of Trustees is made up of a variety of different people, but there are a lot of people from the private sector on that board. There are a lot of current and former CEOs on that board, very much including John Compton, of course. And it has always seemed that one reason the board gets along with Boyd so well is kind of like they feel like he's one of them, right? I mean, sometimes I feel like with the University Board of Trustees, there can feel like when you have a board that's made up mostly of business leaders, which is pretty common for University Board of Trustees, but the president is somebody who has come up through academia or through public policy or whatever. There can be a little bit of a gap there in kind of translating between those, and that gap clearly doesn't exist with Boyd. Boyd speaks their language. They're all used to looking at sort of corporate quarterly earnings reports and things like that. So there just has always seemed to be this great level of real personal comfort between the board and Boyd, right?
Yeah, and especially his relationship with John Compton. Compton's the CEO, and he works for. As the chair of the board, he works directly with Boyd more than any of the other members do, and he and another businessman, CEO Bill Rhodes, another trustee, both waxed poetic about how what a great job they think that Boyd has done, and so yeah, he does speak their language. And one of the things that he's done is he's really emphasized the whole workforce angle instead of I think people who come up through academia tend to be more get an education for education's sake, and you'll still be able to get a job. But the big thing is to get your education, be a very well educated person. Period. Boyd takes that a step further, and he wants to produce a lot of people who can work, and preferably in his mind for Tennessee companies. One of the things that he's done, he's created a new college that's just started this year that basically they'll tailor a degree program for if there's a big enough business with enough need for a lot of people, they'll tailor a degree program for them through that college. So that's pretty unusual way to do it. I don't know many other schools that do. I'm sure there are a few, but.
Well, and that gets to, when Boyd was first hired, there was a lot of concern among people in the faculty and grad students and so forth about somebody coming in who didn't have an academic background. I mean, Boyd has a master's degree, but he's not an academic in any way. And, there was concern about sort of exactly what you're talking about, that, he's just going to see the university as kind of a job preparation program and won't value the broader kind of liberal arts Enlightenment values of the traditional four-year university. But so to that end, did anybody show up, faculty members or otherwise, at the meeting to raise any concerns about Boyd? Or at this point, is he kind of seemingly keeping people happy?
Not one person showed up to talk about Boyd. In talking about making his recommendation to the board and doing the evaluation, Compton, who said that he spoke with faculty members and chancellors and a lot of stakeholders, and he said 99% of them said that he's doing a great job, exceeding expectations. So, of course, they kind of laughed, and Boyd said that he wanted to know who the other 1%, the 1%. So he needs to get them on board.
Right.
Nobody showed up for that. The only people that showed up during the entire the annual meeting goes over 2 days, and the only people who spoke out there were a couple of pro-Palestinian activists who came and to the finance committee meeting and requested the UT divest itself of any investments in companies that do business with Israel. But nobody came to complain about Boyd.
Right. All right. Well, and I do think it's worth just mentioning. I mean, of course, we talk about Randy Boyd a lot. It's hard to avoid talking about Randy Boyd if you're talking about local issues.
You're Knoxville, yeah. You're
can't avoid Boyd.
Can't avoid the Boyd. But, I think it's worth noting that he is a fairly unusual figure. Like, we haven't had somebody like this before. You can certainly point to Jim Haslam, founder of Pilot, obviously, as somebody who was both a local business leader and also was extremely involved for many, many years at the University of Tennessee, including chairing the board of trustees. So very closely related. But, Jim Haslam was not president of the university. He didn't actually run the place. And so Boyd, at the same time that he's actually running the university, is also still this very prominent business lead, even though he's not directly involved with his old business anymore, but he is still involved with the Knoxville Smokies. And so he is also the guy who's moving his minor league baseball team back to Knoxville, to the publicly funded stadium that he managed to get the local governments to approve. And he and his family members own a good chunk of the old city and the area surrounding the stadium. He's not universally beloved. There are detractors out there. There are people who think that, the city and county shouldn't be building a stadium for him and so forth. But he's unusual. Like, this is a significant figure in sort of like Knoxville and Knox County history, I think.
Yeah, he's relentlessly positive, and people who like Randy Boyd actually just love Randy Boyd.
Yeah.
People who don't, would just as soon he go away. And,
but that doesn't seem likely to happen.
It's not going to happen. No. And it's funny you mentioned Jim Haslam. Jim was at the Friday's meeting at the Board of Trustees, where they and he and his wife Natalie were there, and because the board gave formal approval to rename or to naming the new College of Music, the Natalie Haslam College of Music, and they were there. There were one or two glowing comments that were thrown their way as well. There's it's got two colleges now at the university named after Haslam's, one after Natalie, one after Jim, and so
both of them reflecting tens of millions of dollars.
In gifts. They got the football practice fields are named Haslam. There were other things. They've got chairs and all kinds of endowments there that are they've been very generous to the university. And I think one thing is I don't know how old Natalie is. Jim is, I believe, 93 now, and he's the last surviving member of the 1951 national championship football team.
Yeah,
and I think they really enjoyed having a moment to publicly thank them for everything they've done over the past several decades. Other UT news that happened: Compton was reappointed as the chair of the board.
So the Compton-Boyd partnership goes forward.
It is moving forward. They did some tinkering to the guaranteed admissions program, which they tried to remove some ambiguity in how it was.
And that's basically a program that's giving guaranteed admission to top performing students in Tennessee high schools.
Right. Yes. UT, to get into UT Knoxville, you got to have a 4.0 or be the top 10% of your class now. I mean, they went through several changes. I'm hoping I remember this correctly because I'm not looking at it. But the 4.0 grade point average or top 10% of your graduating class and 24 on your ACT, a minimum score. One of the things that they went back and forth over was the 10%, top 10% of your high school graduating class. Because high schools across the country, including Tennessee, have gone away from ranking students in their graduating classes, and only about 30% of Tennessee's high schools do that now. And so they were going to get rid of it altogether. Some of the trustees wanted to bring it back. One of the things about this guaranteed admissions thing, you've got to go through the early application process. It's not if you wait till the standard application time. You just go through the regular, what they call the holistic review of for admissions, but you got to go through the early admission or the early application process. So, and the other campuses have the same criteria, but a lower minimum ACT score. It's 18 instead of 12. So.
Right. But we should also mention, I mentioned baseball at the top of the podcast, and we're not going to talk a lot about it because we're not a sports podcast, but it's worth noting that in between the 2 days of those trustees meetings, the UT men's baseball team, I guess I don't have to say men's baseball team, the UT baseball team won the College World Series in Omaha and then came back and had a big parade Tuesday evening downtown on Gay Street and a big ceremony on Market Square, which was very, very hot, but tens of thousands of people came down. Anyway, it was quite a sea of orange taking over downtown, and that was pretty exciting to see. And I'm sure the trustees were happy to be able to have their meeting coincide with that.
Yeah, well, that was kind of making lemonade out of a lemon. Everybody there wanted to be in Omaha. Everybody. Chancellor Dante Plowman came over to the media table on Thursday and boldly predicted a UT victory. And kind of laughed and said, well, that's really not news. It's news if you predicted a Texas A&M victory. And she said, I'm not doing that. But
Well, they made it close.
They did.
But they did squeak it out.
They did their best to try to give it away.
Yeah.
To A&M. But yeah, they were the trustees were all very happy and excited. As you said, there's a huge crowd downtown. The parade down Gay Street, people were Christmas parades and everything else. People are up on the sidewalks. People spilled out into the street. There was barely enough room for the parade itself to go through down the middle of Gay Street. And one interesting thing that happened was the city council met on Tuesday when the parade happened, and the parade was going to start at 6:30. Council meeting started at 6, and they announced they were going to recess so everybody could go to the parade, which would have really pushed it'd been a long meeting then. But what happened was they dashed through the agenda. They were able to put a lot of items. Usually they don't do this. They don't do this. Other meetings will put a lot of stuff on the consent agenda and voted on it all at once without discussing it. And it was the quickest city council meeting I've ever attended. It lasted maybe 15 minutes. Plus, there were a couple of speakers for public forum. They were out of there in plenty of time to get to the parade. So
and Mayor Kincannon was down at the celebration on Market Square presenting a proclamation to Coach Tony Vitello and the whole team. So it was a big old party. It was a good day on Rocky Top, as they say. However, that was followed by some not quite so rosy news for the city and the university, having to do with the proposed pedestrian bridge across the Tennessee River, which would be anchored on the north side on the UT campus, close to Thompson Bowling Arena, which is what I'm still calling it. Unless and until somebody pays me to call it something different. And we'll go across the river to the kind of Scottish Pike area of South Knoxville. And the city had applied again for a federal grant, Scott. And again, the answer was
no. Yeah, they applied for a $25 million, what's called a RAISE grant. That's the Rebuilding American Infrastructure with Sustainability and Equity grant program. It's a Department of Transportation program. This year they gave out $1.8 billion in grants, and UT did not get any of it. The City of Knoxville did not get any of it. The only one project in Tennessee did. It was Memphis. These grants are highly competitive. There were about $13 billion worth of projects applied for these grants, and as I said, only $1.8 billion actually got funded. So a lot of local governments were disappointed all over the country this week when that happened in Knoxville, one of them, and one of the things that does, and they're going to find out kind of what they would need to do to improve their application if they decide to reapply next year, because they are going to have a debriefing with the Department of Transportation people. And
but they went through that process last year, right?
Yeah.
They applied for it. They didn't get it. They went through the debriefing. They came back with what they hoped would be. They even hired a consultant to help them draft a better application, and they still didn't get it.
Well, and then what they were hanging their hat on was last year the governor had said that he would provide $20 million in state funding for the project, but the budget hadn't been passed, so that wasn't finalized, and there was a little bit unclear on the remaining money, because that's $20 million. This would be a $25 million federal grant. That's a $15 million. You get $15 million more dollars to get to the $60 million price tag for the pedestrian bridge, and they're going to use tax increment financing, which they don't have to really do anything special to do that because the South Waterfront is in a what's called a TIF zone, and basically one big project down there is enough to cover that over the course of the time. So, and UT has bought the land over there. UT's already spent $9 million on it, and so they're going to reassess, see if they can come up with other funding sources. I don't know where those would come from, but they may see if UT wants to kick in some more. I don't know.
What is the gap that this leaves given the projected cost of the bridge?
Well, it's $25 million that they don't. It's a $25 million hole that they need to fill, and so that's the thing. They might be able to get, maybe a deep-pocketed foundation. The Aslan Foundation has a lot of property holdings in South Knoxville. They might do something else. They might not. I mean, it's not really kind of what they do.
Right. Yeah. This project feels it would be a different sort of thing for them to do, for sure.
Yeah, but
it may also be the kind of thing where they're not going to get $25 million from anywhere, but maybe the goal is to piece together a couple million here, a couple million there. The city kicks in a little bit more. Yeah. Maybe they get the county to kick in a little bit.
Well, and
of course, as we've talked about, Knox County doesn't really have any extra money to spend on anything these days.
Well, and one thing too, the UT is a partner, and we talk about getting people to donate. Maybe they'll approach the Haslams and they'll donate the Jim and Natalie Haslam Bridge.
Right.
I don't know.
So there's more discussion. The idea is not dead, basically.
Yeah. In other words, I'm starting a rumor here.
Right.
And also they're moving forward with a master plan for that section of the South Waterfront, which they've started calling the downriver section. So, which is everything west of Chapman Highway. Yeah, they're gonna, the long saga of the bridge, pedestrian bridge, which actually started back in 2006.
Yeah, talking about this for a while. Well, and we should mention, so this was the second time the city was turned down for a RAISE grant, but about 10 years ago, there was a different federal grant, the Tiger grant, that the city applied for that also got rejected. So this is actually the third time the city has applied for a sizable federal grant for this project and been refused. And you kind of wonder how many more times.
How many shots there?
All right. Well, we'll see. One question, because I got a question from a reader about this. Just want to know, what is the estimated actual usage of this bridge? And my immediate response to that was, well, it may be a little bit hard to say because probably a lot of people who would be using it would be living in apartments and places in South Knoxville that don't even actually exist yet, right?
Yeah, well, there's they're from, if we want to, go from Chapman Highway on down, we've got their apartments on either side of Chapman Highway, or either side of Chapman Highway, either side of West Blount Avenue there, right on the corner. There are more apartments. You've got to go through that skinny railroad overpass, but there are more apartments there. There are more coming in. The largest apartment complex that was approved in Knox County last year is under construction, just a stone's throw from where the bridge would terminate. There is another, the city owns another large parcel right by where the bridge would terminate, that they will probably, KCDC would be the redevelopment agency. They would probably put out an RFP for that, and that could provide a big, plenty of space there. It's right on the river. the UT property where the bridge is landing. UT is going to build something there. Now, they've said it'll be student housing, not undergraduate housing. They're not going to do that. Now, they could put some other things in there. It could be an academic building, could be an administrative building, could be they could have some residential units in there for visitors from to campus and that sort of thing. So there are a lot of people there that could use that bridge, and there are people who live over there, even if they have nothing to do with the university. On down the line, UT is going to be building an entertainment district, essentially on the next to Neyland Stadium. It will be a short walk from the end of the northern end of the bridge to this entertainment district, and so the concept is for restaurants and nightclubs and retail stores, things like that to go in there. So there will be something besides just the university campus for people to go to right there. And of course, you'll be able to bicycle across it, so that'll help with the connectivity with the greenways on either side of it.
Right, in the urban wilderness, and certainly it could be a more attractive way for cyclists to get across the river than, say, the Henley Bridge, which is filled with traffic. All right, well, so we will see what comes out of that. A bit of a setback for the bridge, but the bridge is not dead. Whether you're a supporter or a detractor of it, it is still a live concept, at least. Well, let's talk about elections. We do have the August 1st election coming up, which is the Knox County general election, and it's also primary election for state and federal offices. And we continue to run candidate profiles in the various contested races. So this week we had another couple of those. We had took a look at 2 county commission races in the 2nd and 4th district. And the 2nd district, where we happen to be sitting right now as we are taping this, coming to you from the heart of the 2nd district here in North Knoxville, is notable because it is currently one of just 2 of the 11 seats on commission that's held by a Democrat. And that is incumbent Commissioner Courtney Durrett, who is running for re-election. And she is facing, on the ballot, she's up against 2 candidates, Republican Debbie Phillips and an independent candidate named Ethan Grantham. In practice, it's hard to tell if Ethan Grantham is really running much of a campaign. He did have some campaign social media accounts, or I guess I should say he does have some because they're still active, but he hasn't posted anything on them since April, so it doesn't give the impression of a real active campaign, and he hasn't reported raising or spending any money. Anyway, Grantham he's a detective with the Knoxville Police Department, and in the limited amount, he did not return our calls, hoping to interview him about his run. In the limited amount of social media posting that he's made, he kind of presented himself as an independent, as somebody who wants to be a pragmatic voice for the residents of the district. And he raised some concerns about the current representation in the seat, but didn't say anything super specific. I talked to both Durrett and Debbie Phillips, and Phillips is the president of the Norwood Homeowners Association, or the Norwood Neighborhood Association in kind of northwest Knoxville, which is a large and fairly politically active area. It was for years the base of Lynn Redmond, who those of us who've covered local politics for a long time remember. And he really almost single-handedly, I think, made Norwood sort of an important spot on the Knoxville political map. Lynn was somebody who people were running for office anywhere in the city and even in the county would go and consult with. Since he passed away a few years ago, Norwood hasn't had quite that level of visibility, but Debbie Phillips, that is her home base. And she basically talked about, wanting to improve the quality of life in the 2nd district. One issue with the second district is that I think it's the only county commission district that's entirely within the city of Knoxville limits. Even the first district, which is the other currently Democratic held seat on commission, there's a little piece of the first district that is not within city limits, but all of the second district is. And so what that means is that when it comes to day-to-day services, those are mostly provided by, especially law enforcement, fire protection, solid waste collection, all of that is provided by the city, not by the county. And so, and Phillips and Durrett both acknowledge that. Phillips said that nevertheless, she wants to, as county commissioner, to work closely with city government on addressing issues around homelessness, which is certainly a prominent and visible issue here in the second district, crime concerns, and also, housing affordability issues that people in both city and county government are spending a lot of time talking about. She wants to focus on all of those. Durrett, who has been in the seat for the past 4 years, kind of pointed to some of the things that she has worked on that have been particularly meaningful to the second district, including the joint city-county mental health and urgent care center going in on the old St. Mary's Hospital property, which is in the second district. Even though it's not only serving the second district, but it's providing another place for people who are in mental health crisis and people who it's not a full service emergency room, but people who have certain kinds of urgent care needs can go to right here in North Knoxville. So she talked about that. And then beyond that, just kind of talked about wanting to continue to emphasize commercial reinvestment and redevelopment here in the second district along, especially along North Broadway and North Central Street, where there has been some reinvestment, but certainly still a lot of blighted and underutilized properties. For example, there's currently a public process going on being led by the East Tennessee Community Design Center, trying to generate some ideas about what could go into the old Northgate Shopping Plaza on Broadway, which is a huge and mostly empty commercial center. People might remember it as the place that used to have Kmart and used to have a Food City and no longer has either of those. So those are the kinds of things that Durrett really wants to try to bring some county perspective and support for, even though the district is completely within the city. The district, Scott, has certainly trended pretty Democratic in recent years, and given Durrett's stature as an incumbent, status as an incumbent, and also she's the relatively rare Democratic incumbent who's raised more money than her Republican opponent in this cycle in the county. Probably you would have to say that she would appear to have the stronger position heading into the election.
Yeah, like you said, there's Norwood's very politically active. She might even run off Norwood. She won't, but her home base is Fountain City, which is also got a lot of politically active people there, and I think she's and then the further in toward downtown you get, the more Democratic you get precinct wise. So yeah, I think that if you're going to handicap the race, I think that she would be the odds-on favorite for that. So
she even interestingly has support from she has support from a lot of traditional Democratic donors, but also from some Republicans, including a couple of developers. I think it mostly shows that I think people expect her to win. Yes, so that people who are anticipating doing business in the county in coming years probably want to be on her good side, which shocking news maybe to some people, but that's the reason that people will tell you they make donations to candidates because, hey, I just support good government and I just want to be represented by good local commissioners and council members. And, I'm sure that enters into it to some degree, but a lot of people make donations because they know they are going to be coming to the local elected bodies and asking for things. And when you do that, it is helpful to have people up there who remember you from your kind help during their campaign. All right. We also wrote about District 4, which we've talked about a bit because this is the most purple district in the county. It's basically a section of West Knoxville that starts in Sequoia Hills and runs out along North Shore and Kingston Pike. It includes West Hills and Rocky Hill and gets out into the Bluegrass area to the west. And it is currently represented by a Republican, and it has been traditionally represented on County Commission by a Republican, although there have been Democrats in that seat from time to time. So it's always been a somewhat competitive district. But as with a lot of the districts we're talking about, the more urban districts, the closer you are into the center of the city, those precincts have been turning more and more Democratic. We have talked about how Sequoia Hills, for example, used to be a Republican bastion. It was kind of the home of the Republican establishment in Knoxville, going back to the 1990s. No more. Sequoia Hills votes pretty reliably Democratic. West Hills has become very politically competitive and has trended more Democratic. And this very district 2 years ago in a school board race elected a Democrat, Catherine Bike, over a better funded Republican. And so I think this is the seat, Scott, that Democrats see as their best chance to flip one, right?
Oh, absolutely. They aren't in position to flip very many seats, and realistically, it's probably the only one that they would be able to flip, at least now.
Well, there's an interesting race in South Knoxville, which we'll talk about in a future episode.
Yes, it is very interesting, but I think that this was their best shot at doing it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're right. The Sequoia Hills, 30 years ago, when you and I were starting out as journalists in Knoxville, that was that's if they were a traditional Republican who ran, Victor Ashe, who actually lives on Kingston Pike, not in Sequoia Hills.
He lives across the street from Sequoia Hills.
It's funny, Victor always used to say that he lived in Marble City, which is not the case.
Right.
But a lot of prominent attorneys, a lot of prominent public business leaders lived in Sequoia Hills, and probably still do. But then their neighbors are university professors at UT, and who are a little bit more leaning Democratic. So.
Or younger business people. I know several who live in Sequoia Hills who are quite prosperous and prominent, but are also fairly liberal and democratic. Yeah. And so, this is all part of that kind of sorting that we're seeing across the country, where your more urban areas are becoming more blue and your more suburban rural areas becoming more red. And this district, because it really about half the district's in the city, about half of it is outside the city. It's certainly not going to be a blowout for anybody, or it would be a big surprise if it was. But it has attracted, I think, two candidates who are pretty representative in a lot of ways of the district, because they're both pretty politically moderate. The Republican is Garrett Holt. The Democrat is Shane Jackson. Holt works in real estate. He grew up actually in the area and has moved back to it after college. He ran for city council a couple of years ago in the 6th district because of where he was living at the time, and did not fare well. Even though it was a nonpartisan race, he was part of the slate that ran as explicitly defined Republicans, and the 6th district is traditionally quite Democratic, and so he didn't do well there, but he's probably better equipped to run in this district. He had a primary challenge from Republican Liz Tomras, who accused him of not being a real conservative, and during the primary, he kind of leaned into that. He didn't say he wasn't a real conservative, but he said, I'm kind of by temperament a fairly moderate person. He made one political donation to the Democratic candidates in 2016 that Republicans kind of used against him to try to say he wasn't a real Republican. But he won that Republican primary easily, which I think just goes to show that he does actually, Democrats and Republicans in that district both tend to be relatively moderate. It's not a place of real extreme partisan rancor, I don't think. And both of the candidates running reflect that. Jackson is a banker who grew up in Athens, Tennessee, and actually was on the city council there in Athens for a term before taking a job here with the Knoxville Bank and coming here. And so he also is presenting himself very, he's a business guy, he's a pragmatist, kind of talks about he liked that the Athens City Council was nonpartisan. He thinks that nonpartisan government at the local level is a more effective way to do things. And so, he kind of talks about approaching, even though he's running as a Democrat here, kind of taking that pragmatic, not so ideological approach to county commission. And they have both raised a good amount of money. Neither one of them is going to have any trouble paying for whatever, their yard signs and mailers and everything else. And both of them appear, Noah, and I'm going to bring you into the conversation here because both Jackson and Holt appeared at a candidate forum that you attended and wrote about for us this past Thursday evening. There were 12 county commission candidates who came out to the forum. It was a little bit unwieldy. I was the moderator for it, and the biggest problem that I had was just kind of remembering, because we had to rotate, who would start answering the next question. Right. By the time you get through 12 people answering a question, it can get hard to remember where you started the last one. Yeah. But I thought it was interesting, like talking about Jackson and Holt in particular. Mm-hmm. They didn't have really divergent answers, I didn't feel like, to most of the questions that got asked.
No, they didn't. I agree with you. And the only way I think you can sort of see a slight partisan divide was more so just in little sort of signals that I think they would throw out to questions, rather than saying they had, vastly different or even at all different approaches to, the questions were about, what are we going to do about the revenue issue and how are we going to service our debts? There was a couple Democrats who said we need a tax increase. Jackson was not one of them. He said, just like Holt, we need to be creative and we need to think about how we're going to attract great businesses here. But like on a question about AMR, the county's ambulance provider, Jackson kind of had one of those more maybe liberal signals that was talking about like staffing issues, kind of more the labor side, whereas Holt was very much so, I'm a little bit skeptical of AMR, and I'm very much so willing to bring in a different provider if they're not meeting our standards. So I think that was one of those things where you could just see maybe a slightly different philosophy, but yeah, on the main points, they both expressed that they were, pretty moderate on the issues.
Yeah, and so I think in this election, it'll, as is always the case, it depends on turnout. But in a race like this, where the district itself is so seems relatively evenly divided, I think it'll really come down to the turnout, and not just who in that district is excited, but whether, like, if the August we talked about how the March primary generically was a more Republican turnout because of the races that were on the ballot. A lot of Democrats just stayed home in the March primary. We don't know what's going to happen in the August 1st election. Like, what are the external factors beyond the local races that are going to drive more Democrats or more Republicans out? And I think that probably, but both of these candidates are running what appeared to be very credible, well-financed, well-supported campaigns. Yeah. And it's just going to be who actually comes out. All right. And Scott, we also, you wrote about one of the few countywide races on the ballot August 1st, which is the law director's race between incumbent David Book and Democrat Jackson Fenner. And one of the notable things about this is that, as far as we know, this might be the only law director election in the state of Tennessee.
Yeah. Excuse me. Yeah, pretty much is. I don't know of another county law director who is elected. And so, they typically are appointed. Law director is not a position that is mandated by the state constitution. So it is a creation of the county charter, and there was a movement to make it an appointed position back after in the aftermath of Black Wednesday, same election when the voters approved shrinking the county commission from 19 seats to 11. They were also asked about making some of the offices, appointed offices, that property assessor, registered deeds, a couple of other offices that are more technical in nature. But the voters rejected that.
I think they've actually rejected it 3 or 4 separate times.
Yeah.
It was on the ballot again a couple of years ago. One of the things that happens the last 2 times it's been on the ballot, what has been interesting is that the proposal to put the item on the ballot comes out of the county charter review committee, but then it goes to the county law department to write the language that actually goes on the ballot. Mm-hmm. And guess who runs the county law department?
The law director. And invariably, the language that appears on the ballot is something along the lines of, do you want to give up your right to vote for this office? And
it's written in the absolutely most prejudicial way possible. Everybody knows this. It's been controversial both times that the law department has written that language, and the law department's response has basically been too bad, so sad, And so we still have an elected law director, and this year David Book is seeking a second term.
He is seeking a second term. The interesting thing is this is actually a rematch from the first time he ran. Jackson Fenner ran as an independent in 2020. Book handily won that race. He had about 63% of the vote. And then Fenner ran for Attorney General 2 years ago and didn't fare much better against Sharm Allen, but he's back again, seeking the law director's office. Book has he's been in the office the last 4 years. Some controversial things that he's done. Some of the stuff has been he was drafted the way to eliminate the board or take the powers, decision-making powers away from the Board of Health during the COVID, the height of the COVID pandemic. And so, that was one thing. He, of course, the county also, one of the things that Fenner points out is that, in his view, unwisely defended the sheriff's office in a public records lawsuit over their immigration coordination with the federal government. And but he's also got experience. He's been an attorney for 44 years. He prior to being elected law director in 2020, he'd spent 8 years as the deputy director, law director under Bud Armstrong. And prior to that, he spent years and years doing government law and especially land use. He led the opposition to city annexations and quite successfully, all during the 90s and early 2000s. So he's got a lot of experience. He knows he knows how the political winds blow and everything else. Fenner hasn't been an attorney as long, but he came to Knoxville. He actually did worked in various odd jobs around before he started taking classes. And eventually got his degree from UT and his law degree. And it's kind of interesting. One of the he's an interesting character in that a lot of the he's a little bit critical of the law department, but unlike a lot of people, a lot of candidates, he doesn't get annoyed when people bring up state or national issues that the Knox County has no control over whatsoever. And that's a frequent complaint of candidates all over all these local offices. They'll say, well, door to door, what are people mad about? Well, people are mad about Palestine. People are mad about
immigration.
Yeah. That's and they kind of say, I had to explain to him. Vinner embraces it. He really he'll tell you. I mean, first thing out of his mouth when I asked him what he thought the biggest issue was in Knox County is he said school vouchers. So we need to do everything we can to resist them. Well, it's kind of a state thing there.
Right. County law department does not have an obvious role in that.
But he also talks about how Supreme Court decision on the Dobbs decision, which did away with the constitutional right to an abortion, how it's a travesty. He talks about several things like that. And he said that the reason he does that is, A, that's what the people want to talk about. And B, he said, that even though Knox County does anything directly, it isn't directly involved in those issues, people like to be assured that the people who hold office and represent them share the same values. Mm-hmm. And so he is, like I said, he just fully embraces this discussion about national and statewide issues. And,
it's worth noting that any Democrat running for a countywide seat these days is at a clear disadvantage because we haven't had a Democrat elected countywide since, I think, 2006 was the last one. So we're going on close to 20 years. It's a challenging political terrain for any Democrat.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And, it's funny, one of the things that they share, that Duke and Fenner share, is a real discomfort raising money. Neither of them have raised a whole lot of money. Mm-hmm. Duke loaned himself his campaign some money, his personal loan to the campaign, but neither one of them is raising a lot of money. And they both say that's what they hate about running for office is having to raise money. And so they probably are going to be spending less than any other countywide office holder in last 2 or 3 election cycles.
If you compare it to the other countywide race, which we will be talking about in future weeks, the property assessors race, that's one that typically does raise a tremendous amount of money. And probably the law director's race is going to be a tiny fraction.
Oh, yeah, about 10%, maybe 20. There's that. And one of the things that they talk about too, because law director there's not a policy. It's not a policy making position. So they talk about the staffing. Duke likes to say that his staff is all this experience, a long time. Mike Moyers, who's his chief deputy, is a former law director himself and a former judge, Chancery Court, and he likes to talk about that. Fenner, kind of takes pains to say, well, I'm not going to come in, if I get elected, I'm not going to just come in and make wholesale changes. There are good people in that office that I want to keep. He definitely wants to keep the the support staff, the paralegals, and all these. He thinks that the attorneys, some of them will probably go, but he's not going to go in and start firing attorneys. So anyway, as you said, though, it's a tall order for Fenner in this race, just because it's a tall order for any Democrat running countywide.
Yeah, and I also think it's always important with the law department to it is true they don't make policy, and they say that all the time. I've heard people say that many times. We don't make policy, talking to county commission or the school board, like, you all make the policy, we're just there to advise you. However, there are many times, and I have been in many meetings of county commission and the school board, where either the law director or the representative there from the law department, yes, they are giving advice on some particular issue, but they are very much sending strong signals about what they think should happen.
Yeah.
And so I think it is true they don't make policy, but it is definitely not true that they don't influence policy.
They help shape the policy
or try to influence policy.
Well, I mean, they're going to help influence policy from their. And this is where you get into the weird thing about having an independently elected law director. The law department represents the county mayor, represents the county commission, represents the register of deeds, represents everybody. Well, if the mayor has a policy that he would like to pursue, and there are several commissioners who have a slightly different policy they want to pursue on the same topic, who does the law director represent?
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of that just gets back to regular politics. If the law director is close to the mayor, then it's probably going to help the mayor shape the policy proposal. If he's more in line with some of the commissioners, he might meet with them and try to shape the policy that they're willing to forward. And so it's one of those quirks that we have to live with, at least until and unless the charter gets changed.
Well, certainly not going to happen this year.
Nope.
All right. The other thing I wanted to talk about in regards to elections was we had this interesting story this week. It's a state level issue, but it had a local manifestation, which is state coordinator of elections, Mark Goings, who basically is the top state election official. He's under Secretary of State Trey Hargett, but kind of all under the apparatus of state elections, kind of under Goings' general supervision. His office sent out letters a couple of weeks ago to, it turns out, a little over 14,000 people across Tennessee. And these letters apparently have gone to people who are naturalized citizens in Tennessee who are registered to vote, which you can do. If you're a naturalized citizen, you get all of the rights of citizenship, including registering to vote and voting.
A naturalized citizen is an American citizen.
That's right. Most of us in our heritage somewhere have people who were naturalized at some point in our family trees. And it flagged. So the way they apparently chose who to send these letters to is it's people who, when they first applied to get a Tennessee driver's license or other form of legal state identification, were not yet citizens. And so there's, it's people you can do that. If you are a legal resident alien, for example, or if you are somebody here on a temporary work visa, you can get a driver's license in Tennessee because, a lot of times people need to be able to drive. If they're here legally, they're working, they need to be able to drive, they can get a driver's license. And so when they fill out the form, they have to mark on that driver's license form that they are not a citizen, but they have to provide their other documentation to show that they're here legally and that they do qualify for the driver's license. So that's in the database somewhere, and the state can go and search for anybody who applied for a driver's license and check the box saying they weren't a citizen. They got their driver's license. Okay. Then some number of those people go on to become naturalized citizens. and then they are eligible to register to vote. They cannot register to vote until they become citizens. And so that sequence of getting your driver's license first, and then some years later getting naturalized and getting registered to vote, that's a very normal sequence. That's for somebody who comes here as a legal alien and then gets naturalized. That's exactly the sequence you're going to go through. But what the state did was they basically ran that database of people who checked that box saying they were not a citizen when they got their driver's license, and they ran it against people who are registered voters in Tennessee. And they got these 14,000 hits. Nothing about that should be surprising or unusual. All it means is that there were 14,000 some people who came here, were here legally, got a legal driver's license, eventually got naturalized, became citizens, are now registered voters. There's zero suspicious about that at all. That's just it's literally how the system is set up to work. These are just people who are just filling out the legal forms at each stage. But the state is using that to go back to all of those people, and they have sent these letters that have very ominous language in it, saying our records show that when you first got a driver's license, you weren't a citizen, but you're registered to vote, and we need to know about this. And it's like, well, yeah, to get registered to vote, they had to go through the naturalization process. Our election commission here is not just willy-nilly registering people to vote without checking their citizenship status. In fact, our election commission goes down to naturalization ceremonies when they have these big ceremonies at the courthouse, and they set up a table there and they say, hey, you're new citizens. Why don't you come register to vote? Again, these are people who are just like doing exactly what the system is set up to do.
And naturalized citizens, in my experience, are among the most enthusiastic voters.
Yeah.
Because they have something to compare this to, wherever they came from. But they are often the most enthusiastic voters that we have.
Yeah, and you hear people say it's a thing that makes them feel American. It's how they know they're American. Well, the state is now saying, well, we're not so sure about that. And so even though you have followed every step and you have done nothing wrong, and Going's office has not responded to questions about this from us or from the Tennessee Lookout, which wrote about this week, just no response to emails, phone calls. They have not provided any evidence whatsoever that there's some problem with this. That, we've discovered that we are somehow registering people to the only thing that they have to go on is, well, when you got your driver's license, you said you weren't a citizen. How do you explain that you are now registered to vote? It's like, well, we all know the answer to that. They got naturalized. But they've sent out these letters. And the reason that we heard about it here is two of the people who got these letters are the husband and stepson of one of our own Knox County election commissioners, Julie Gautreaux, who's one of the Democrats on the 5-member election commission. Her husband is was born in France. He's now a naturalized U.S. citizen. And he got naturalized in 2016, registered to vote probably that day that he got naturalized, the way people do. And according to her, has voted in every election since with no problem whatsoever. He is an American citizen exercising his right to vote. He got this letter, and the letter requires people to provide to the state evidence that they are actually American citizens. So you have to go through this whole other extra step. Even though you're already registered, you're already a citizen, you have to provide, your naturalization papers or a passport or whatever. And it says that, first of all, if the state is not sure that you're a citizen, that you're at risk of being purged from the rolls. So people who who get these letters and don't respond to them, it's possible that they're going to show up to vote in August or November and be told, you're not registered. You've been purged from the rolls. So there's that part of it. Then the second part of it is the letter is written, it has this very strong language about voter fraud is a felony, and you can be charged with this and this and this. And you think about, let's say somebody who maybe just got naturalized in the last year or two, maybe they haven't even voted yet. They're registered, but they haven't even voted. And suddenly you get this letter from the state that kind of implies that there's some kind of suspicious going on with your record here because you said you weren't a citizen. And also threatens, all these criminal penalties. Gotro's concern, and she wrote an email to Mark Goines, the coordinator of elections, expressing this, is that this is going to intimidate people who are legal, citizens and are legal registered voters. It's going to intimidate people from actually going and voting because it looks scary. It's worded in a scary way. And she basically asked in her email, why are we doing this? Like, what if the goal here is not to intimidate people? What's the point? Where's the problem that you're solving? And Goins did respond to her, probably because she's an election commissioner, and she shared that email with us. And he basically just said, this is just all about ensuring the integrity of our election. Surely you, as an election official yourself, understands the need to have accurate voter rolls, but not really answering the question, which is, well, why do you think they're not accurate? Like, these are people who are, where is the evidence that this is enough of an issue that you have to send out 14,000 letters? And so the ACLU of Tennessee has also flagged this as a problem, and they sent a letter this week to Goins' office basically saying, cease and desist immediately, or we're going to file a lawsuit over this because we think what you're doing is unconstitutional and it's voter suppression. So we'll see what happens out of that. But, it just feels like one of these, and maybe there is some really good justification for this that has yet to be presented, but it has yet to be presented, I guess is what I would say about it.
Yeah, a lot of it may stem from the demonization of all immigrants, not just those who are here without the benefit of official papers. But it kind of seems like that. It's just you're an immigrant, and with that, with blinders on, because as you and I both said, these are American. They're just as much an American citizen as you or I, who were born here. Two ways to be a citizen of the United States: you're born here or you're naturalized. But you're just as much a citizen the second you're naturalized.
Right. We don't have a Class B citizen.
No, and so it does seem like either a fundamental misunderstanding of naturalization, or a willful decision to kind of ignore the reality of what.
Yeah, and you're right. It is hard not to see it in light of the rhetoric around the national election, where, of course, you do have, former President Trump, including at the debate last night that we said we weren't going to talk about, but I'll just mention it here. One of his big charges is that President Biden is allowing illegals to, as he calls it, illegals to flood the country and register to vote, and that's how they're going to steal the election. This is something that Trump is saying, is something that his former advisor, Stephen Miller, who now runs a legal organization, is saying. Miller's legal organization has sent letters to election offices across the country, alerting them to be on the lookout for, fraudulent immigrant voting and so forth. So it does feel like it's in line with that political rhetoric. It's much less clear whether it's actually pegged to any actual concerns about anything.
Yeah, I mean, for all we know, Miller's been doing that. So maybe go on and say, well, maybe if I prove to him I've written this letter, he'll get off my back and let me run into the elections the way we've been running for years with no problem. So,
right, yeah.
And I just have one quick point of clarification. These 1,400 people that 14,000, that they found from this database and sent the letters, there's no indication that those people would not be able to go through the steps to register to vote, right?
Right.
Yeah.
They are registered to vote. That's how they got selected in the first place to receive these letters.
Right. So I'm genuinely confused. I would be curious to know, I'm not, like you said, maybe there is some justification, but I feel personally genuinely confused what they're getting at. If these people, they searched the database for people who are registered to vote and sent them letters and said, are you sure you can vote? You better not.
Right.
I don't know. I don't understand.
Yeah. Well, and that was very much the concern that Gotro raised. And, Democrats in the state legislature have also criticized this. And so, unfortunately, I guess it's a lot of the discussion of it is falling along party lines.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like something that should be a partisan issue. And, there's no necessary like naturalized immigrants who become naturalized citizens. There's nothing that says they're necessarily Democratic voters or Republican voters. I know naturalized citizens, maybe there's some assumption out there that for various reasons, they might be more likely to vote Democratic. I know naturalized citizens who are Republicans. And so, I'm sure that there are some regular Republican voters who have received these letters as well. It just seemed like a bit of an odd thing. And of course, it's coming up so close to the election. That's the other thing that raises questions like, why are you raising, if this was a concern, why are you raising it now instead of like on the off year last year when you could have done the same thing? So who knows? We'll see if anything much comes out of it. I think the real question is going to be if some of the people who receive these letters either don't understand them or don't respond to them and still go to vote, are they actually going to get purged? We don't know that. And I guess we'll see on the August election, maybe the first place that this shows up, whether there are reports of anybody who, was duly registered and shows up and is told, no, sorry, you're not registered anymore because of this. We will find out. And also it's possible that the ACLU is going to file a lawsuit about it, which could affect it as well. All right, I think that's everything we had to talk about for this week. And Scott, looking ahead to the coming week, we don't have a lot to talk about it because it is the big Independence Day holiday, which is falling on a Thursday this year, which means that, first of all, you can pretty much write off anybody doing anything on Friday. Our local governments are all going to be closed on Thursday. They will technically be open on Friday, but it's probably not going to be heavily populated. And I would I feel like when the 4th of July falls anywhere in the midweek, it almost tends to become sort of a whole off week, at least as far as the public sector goes.
Yeah, I think that, it's in the middle of the week. There are a lot of people, are, taking the other 4 days of the week off. And that's going to be their vacation. I would imagine that years like this when Philadelphia and Washington are big vacation destinations. But there's nothing much will be going on, although there will be the city's 4th of July celebration at World's Fair Park.
Festival on the 4th.
World's Fair Park, 5 o'clock till whenever the last firework goes off.
Fireworks usually start around like 9:40, 9:45.
Yeah, somewhere around there. And they'll have live entertainment. The symphony will be down there. All that. Town of Farragut has a 4th of July parade earlier in the day. Mm-hmm. There's all that good stuff. So, let's for a lot of people, it's a week-long happy birthday.
And remember that despite what your neighbors might think or the evidence of your own ears, setting off fireworks is illegal in the city of Knoxville.
Yes, it is. It's it is a law that is broken more often than even rolling through a stop sign. But yes, it is illegal. The fire department likes to remind people all the time that it's illegal. They don't want anybody to, especially now. I mean, we've been so dry here, the dry conditions. They don't want anybody to inadvertently start a brush fire somewhere. So,
well, whatever you're doing, celebrate safely.
Absolutely.
I think it's the best advice we can give. But certainly enjoy the holiday, and we will be back here next week to talk to you again.
Welcome to Compass Points, the weekly podcast for CompassKnox.com. CompassKnox.com is your best source for news and politics in Knoxville and Knox County. Your hosts today are Scott Barker and Jesse Mayshark, the founders of CompassKnox.com. You can find their daily in-depth coverage and subscribe at CompassKnox.com. The Compass Point podcast is brought to you in conjunction with Almost an Agreement. Almost an Agreement is a layman's attempt to get a handle on the workings in government and politics that we deal with every day. Check them out at almostanagreement.com or subscribe for free on your favorite podcast provider. If you'd like to learn more about the topics discussed on today's podcast, go to CompassKnox.com and subscribe for in-depth coverage and much more. And many thanks to William Wright for composing our theme song. Compass Points is a partnership of Barking Shark Media and Barbarian Productions, and recorded by Lord Seth A. Barber at Barbarian Studios, Knoxville, Tennessee.